Hello and welcome to the Amateur Austenite. My name is Frances Duncan. I'm an author and the founder of the Jane Austen Society New Zealand. My very special guest with me today is my friend Sian.
Hello.
And today we are discussing Chapter 2 of Persuasion by Jane Austen. So in Chapter 2 we have that meeting that was set up at the end of Chapter 1 between Sir Walter, Lady Russel and Mr. Shepherd. And they discuss what's to be done about the financial situation, and they decide that they're going to move to Bath and rent out Kellynch Hall.
That was not an easy decision, though, was it? I did like at the beginning with Mr. Shepherd. He would rather have the disagreeable prompted by anybody else, so he excused himself from offering advice.
He's such a yes man.
Oh, absolutely. But I think even at that point, he shows he's an opportunist. He goes with whoever's the most powerful or who's going to get the maximum benefit. I don't think he's particularly bad. I just think he knows his client very well.
So Lady Russel is the one that comes up with the first plan, and she did what nobody else thought of doing. She consulted Anne, who never seemed considered by the others as having any interest in the question. Again, that's she was only Anne. Is that going to echo through the whole book?
That's a good question. We'll have to see that. What struck me about this, though, was thinking of the difference between Lady Russel and Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
Mm-hmm.
She was anxiously zealous on the subject and gave it much serious consider. She was of strict integrity with a delicate sense of honour, but she was desirous of saving Sir Walter's feelings. And she was a benevolent, charitable, good woman and capable of strong attachments, which we see that with her relationship obviously with Anne's mother, but also with Anne herself. But, and there's always a but, she's still very strict in her notions of decorum, and she still has prejudices on the side of ancestry and a value for rank and consequence, which blinded her a little to the faults of those who possessed them. One could argue blinded her a lot to the faults of Sir Eliot, actually. But she was also, again, she was the widow of a baronet and of a knight, as opposed to a baronet who had more status. You can see that she's a different animal, but she still comes with some of the same prejudices, but she has a kinder nature and a more caring nature than Lady Catherine.
She's a hard character to understand because those two things seem so opposed to each other.
But she's still a product of her background and upbringing.
Very much so.
But her nature's quite different.
To Lady Catherine's. So.
I also liked she was most anxiously zealous on the subject of trying to sort something out. And the phrase that she was of sound rather than of quick abilities, and whose difficulties in coming to any decision in this instance were great from the opposition of the two leading principals. Mm-hmm. Basically, she was fighting, Elizabeth and Sir Walter were going to be, they were not going to be easy to retrench at all. So I think it's it was a challenge that she took on, but she took it on graciously.
It's a huge thing to ask a neighbour to do. To say, here's my problem, can you solve it for me?
And in fact, not only that, but do it in such a way that thinks that he's come up with a solution. Sir Walter is, in her apprehension, entitled to a great deal of compassion and consideration under his present difficulties.
The thing that bugs me, though, is his present difficulties are his own fault.
Of course they are. But they must retrench. That did not admit. But they must do it with the least possible pain to him and Elizabeth. Nothing about Mary.
Anne
in that. Least possible pain.
Yeah, the usual fate of Anne attended her and having something very opposite from her inclination fixed on. I feel for her.
Anne was on the side of honesty against importance. Well, we know that's not how Sir Walter works.
Not at all. She stands out as so different from the rest of her family, and we were talking about that last chapter. How you were saying that she seems to come very much from her mother, and the rest of her family seems to be heavily influenced by her father.
Yes.
I guess you can see that in Lady Russel a little bit, that how she would be more of a friend to Lady Eliot. like Anne, she's like, we definitely need to pay these debts off. There is a way to do this that isn't ridiculous. But they're just not really listening to her. They're like, how can we possibly live in dignity?
The true dignity of Sir Walter Elliot will be very far from lessened in the eyes of sensible people by his acting like a man of principle. Well, he isn't a man of principle, is he? He has no idea how to do it. Well, he's not a bad man per se. He's just so totally self-centred.
And a man of his rank, it was important to think of other people because he had tenants that he had to think about. He had a whole estate that he was running.
I did read somewhere that he was an obliging landlord. An attentive neighbour, an obliging landlord.
To Lady Russel, though, but what was he like to his tenants? Did he actually care about their...
Well, it's not clear. Is she a tenant of his?
Yes.
So he's obviously quite obliging to her, as much because of her status.
So they decide to go to Bath, which I always find so weird that they're like, let's move from our... It is an expensive undertaking to run a whole household. But then you imagine going to live in another city would also be quite expensive.
Much smaller household, though, and less staff required.
Oh, that's true.
See, because the cost is actually your staff. Lady Russell's original suggestions could not be borne with. Every comfort of life knocked out. Journeys, London, servants, horses, table, contractions and restrictions everywhere. To live no longer with the decencies of even a private gentleman. No, he would sooner quit Kellynch Hall at once than remain in it on such disgraceful terms. Of course, that's the inn for Mr. Shepherd.
To say, yes, quit Kellynch Hall.
Yes, we have an option here.
And they think of London, but Mr. Shepherd felt that Sir Walter could not be trusted in London.
No, absolutely not.
Which is hilarious. They're talking about an adult here, but they're not treating him like an adult.
He's not behaving like one, is he? Or maybe he is. No, he's the kind of person, even if you washed your hands off, he'd still blame other people. And he would bring down a lot of people with him. You know, all the tradesmen he owed debts to, and all his tenants and things, if he didn't.
He must be in huge amounts of debt if it's going to take them 7 years to get back, which is quite
substantive.
Appalling.
Yes. So since the idea had been started in the very quarter which ought to dictate, he had no scruple in confessing his judgment to be entirely on that side. So this is where he actually, you know, he's a very cunning man in many respects. He knows,
Shepherd,
yes. He chooses his battles carefully. He knows there's some things that he's never going to win.
And of course, he's wanting to be paid as well.
Of course he is.
So Anne's not happy about
the alternatives.
About going to Bath.
No.
She disliked Bath and did not think it agreed with her.
Mm.
She went there after her mother's death. She went there to school, and then she went there to visit Lady Russel because Lady Russel spends part of her winter there. And she was not in perfectly good spirits, which is a breadcrumb for what comes later.
Yes.
But Anne doesn't visit Bath with Lady Russell, and you kind of assume from their close relationship that she would go over a year with her, but she doesn't.
Couldn't be spared.
Even though she's only Anne.
So Bath is a much safer place. He might be important at comparatively little expense. So essentially he's going to be a big fish in a small pond.
Which he will enjoy very much. He's so self-important. How quick come reasons for approving what we like? What a Jane Austen quote. Sir Walter is approving it because he would like to, you know, be important in the city. And Lady Russell is at this point deciding that already she wanted them to go because she likes Bath and she wants Anne to get out in society more.
Yes.
She's also noticed that Elizabeth is friends with Mrs. Clay, who is Mr. Shepherd's daughter, and Lady Russell does not approve.
No.
She thinks her a dangerous companion.
Yes.
Which is just beautiful. In hopes that a removal would leave Mrs. Clay behind. Get Elizabeth more suitable companions, or suitable intimates as they refer to it here.
Mrs. Clay. But she was a very clever young woman who understood the art of pleasing, or at least the art of pleasing at Kellynch Hall, and had made herself so acceptable to Miss Elliot as to have already been staying there more than once, in spite of all that Lady Russell, who thought it a friendship quite out of place, could hint at caution. And of course it goes on to say that actually Lady Russel has very little influence over Elizabeth.
I mean, actually staying with her, that's very intimate.
Mm-hmm.
We're having sleepovers. This is sleepover territory.
Yes.
And this is a woman who is a widow, whose father is a lawyer. It's very not appropriate for Miss Elliot of Kellynch Hall.
Yes.
And it's surprising that she and Sir Walter are both happy with the situation.
So we've had some major characters introduced in the first 2 chapters. The heir was introduced in chapter 1 as not having much time for Sir Walter. And now we have Mrs. Clay, who's also a key character further on as well, in different ways. We're not sure at this point, are they good or bad?
You could paint them either way.
You could paint them either way, bearing in mind that Elizabeth and Sir Walter are not exactly the most attractive of characters either. But
That's true, are they villains?
I think they're not an active villain. It takes too much effort.
Even though Elizabeth is bored all the time by life, I could see her trying to be a villain. Like, it would give her something to do.
I did read quite a good fan fiction a few years ago with Elizabeth ending up at Emma's house.
Emma
Woodhouse's house. It was snowbound or something like that, and the carriage ended up there, and so did Darcy's cousin, as well as Darcy and Mrs. O'Rourke. Yes, Colonel Fitzwilliam. And they eventually made a match of it, which actually worked quite well.
Colonel Fitzwilliam is the son of an earl. That might be good enough for the daughter of a baronet. But neither of them have any money. So they talk about Kellynch Hall being let, which was a profound secret not to be breathed. How are you supposed to get someone to rent it if you're not allowed to talk about it?
Yes, could not have borne the degradation of being known to design letting his house. And Mr. Shepherd had once mentioned the word advertise, but never dared approach it again.
Because it's very different if he's choosing to go and live in Bath rather than being forced to go and live in Bath, right?
Yes. And if somebody comes up with you with I'd quite like, any houses around, and then he can say, oh, well, I'm thinking of going to Bath, and if you're interested, you can
rent my house.
No, it's quite a short chapter, this one, so we are moving fast.
And that is our summary of Chapter 2 of Persuasion by Jane Austen. My name is Frances Duncan. You can find me at francesduncanwrites.com and on Twitter at Frances_Duncan. Thank you for listening, and we wish you happy reading.